like to introduce both of our candidates this morning for Port of Bremerton. First, Jack Edwards and Gary Anderson.
Morning.
We'll start with Jack this morning since he's closest to me, for his opening statement. So, Jack, 3 minutes.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I want to thank the Chamber of Commerce for hosting us, and all of you for coming out to watch us and attend this morning. And thank you for BCAT for filming. Why am I running for this position? Well, as a young age, community service was something that was part of our family. My father was a member of the local Lions Club and the local Chamber of Commerce. We as a family went to all the Lions picnics, fundraisers, gatherings, and Chamber socials. This gave me the importance of giving back and a sense of community. So when I arrived in Kitsap County, I immediately got involved in local activities and organizations. I joined the local Port Orchard Chamber of Commerce. And then I became a manager of a large hotel, which allowed me to expand my horizons. We did a lot of events for local politicians, did fundraisers for many nonprofits, and I got to interact with these people in these organizations. I then became a board member on Visit Kitsap and hosted a bunch more, and then with organizations. I then worked with Kitsap Economic Development Alliance and became a board member for the Kitsap Athletic Roundtable, member of the Port Orchard Chamber of Commerce, and I did other things that didn't necessarily make the news but were important. As I was the founder of the first Harbor Festival and put on the golf tournament for the Puget Sound Naval Bases Association. But my proud moment was when I became the Economic Development Manager for the City of Bremerton. This really allowed to use my knowledge and marketing background and put my experience to use. I worked with the Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council, the Puget Sound Regional Council, as well as all the other local economic development organizations. Now I want to use my experience to serve the interests of the Port's taxpayers and businesses. I think with my love for economic development, the position will allow me to seek ways to develop the Port's assets and create jobs. The Port does things I'm interested in, and I think my background as an economic development professional will help attract businesses and better use the Port's assets and what it has to offer. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. And now, Gary.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming to this morning. My name is Gary Anderson. I'm running for the Port Commissioner District 2 position. And I've been a lifelong resident of Kitsap County, as my father, grandfather, and great-grandfather were before me. And so I've got deep roots here in Kitsap County. And for that reason, I feel that this is a very important position that I very much want to attain so that I can use my tools, which I'll describe in a minute, to help give back to the community and hopefully make a substantial, important, relevant change to Kitsap County that will help future generations. My background is in accounting. I graduated from University of Central Washington University with a degree in accounting, and so when I was developing my real estate career, I gravitated towards commercial and development property in my experience, and through that experience I was involved in a number of things that have to do with how the county has progressed, including the Growth Management Act, urban growth boundaries, establishing those, and also looking at the county and looking at South Kitsap in different ways on how I felt I could help it develop economically. And that's been the focus of my career as a commercial real estate professional, which included being a stakeholder for the fast ferry proposal that was put forth successfully. Also was a participant in the obtaining the opportunity zone status for 2 census tracts in Port Orchard, allowing future development to be supported by investment, better investment, giving investors a reason to invest in those areas, and I think will bear fruit in Port Orchard and allow it to retain some resources to develop in a way that will give the community a better way of life. Being involved in civic groups has always been something has been important to me. I've been president of the Kitsap County Association of Realtors. I'm a member of the Port Urchin Rotary and the Chamber of Commerce. And giving back to my community is very important to me, and that's why I want to run for Port Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you both. First question, we'll start with you, Gary, and you'll both get the chance to answer. Yellow means you have 10 seconds left in your question. Each of you, what are your top 3 initiatives you would like to achieve during your tenure?
Well, I have some big ideas. Certainly the most important thing is to find ways to help the port become self-sufficient and relieve the taxpayers of the burden that the port currently imposes on them. The port does have some wonderful assets that are wonderful attributes for our community. However, they don't carry their own way. And I think that's something I need to try to focus on. The simplest way at the moment is to encourage more industrial leases in the industrial lands that surround the Bremerton Airport. There are some other ideas that I have, including working with the Navy and the federal government to cut up ships okay.
You want to repeat the question, John?
Your top 3 initiatives
Top 3.
that you want to achieve in your tenure.
Well, the first initiative I would want to follow is really paying attention to the port's budget and its line items, and really I want to pledge to the taxpayers, I want to be fiscally responsible and really make sure that the taxpayers are getting a return on their investment. Make sure that the port is doing things right by the people. One of the other initiatives I like to see going forward, and really one of the most important ones, is develop the port's property and assets. The Puget Sound Industrial Center has great opportunity. It's been recognized by the Puget Sound Regional Council, one of the region's best areas to attract new business. We just need to develop that property. We need to run infrastructure, build some more spec buildings, and attract tenants that are going to bring in good living wage jobs. And one of the other areas I'd like to focus on is helping bring in a new racetrack. There's 220 acres of a 2.7-mile road course with a multi-use facility to include concerts, festivals, fairs, and an educational component of 3 schools for trade. So that's where I'd like to focus.
Next question, we'll start with you, Jack. Educated workforce. From the port's economic development perspective, what are the education needs in our area?
Well, Olympic College does a really great job of doing workforce development for the shipyard. They have some engineering schools and some 4-year degrees that really help track people into those areas. The port has some areas in their industrial center that really would focus on what I just mentioned, the trade jobs. We're lacking in shipbuilders, mechanics, and all those trade professions that support the businesses that are currently in the industrial park. So I think trades need to be promoted. They're not being as well notoriety as they were in the past. A lot of focus is on going to college. But I believe trades is where the future is, and that's where we should focus.
I would have to agree with that. The trades are not being focused on enough. Olympic College does do a wonderful job of providing people with engineering backgrounds and starts into the engineering field to support our Navy work opportunities and the ancillary businesses that locate near the Navy to build things and just in support of Navy operations. And we could even start even earlier in the high schools. There's a lot of students that probably would be better suited for being pushed into the trades area rather than going to college. And I think that would be a wonderful place to start encouraging expansion of the local trades.
Next question. We'll start with Gary this time. The Port of Bremerton taxpayers and voters come from Port Orchard and Bremerton city limits, with a significant additional number being in unincorporated Kitsap County. How will you ensure those voters and taxpayers in unincorporated Kitsap County are being represented fairly and equally?
Well, when I think of South Kitsap, which would be my district, I don't think of it as just Port Orchard. The South Kitsap area draws off about, the businesses draw off about 70,000 population, and that's just definitely not located right in the city of Port Orchard. So when I think of South Kitsap, I think of the whole entire area. And by virtue of that, when I think of how I can serve that community, I will be serving the entire area. And when I talk about ways to serve them through the Port District, that's who I will be speaking to and for. So that's my answer.
Jack?
Can we get the question?
Yes. The Port of Bremerton taxpayers and voters come from Port Orchard and Bremerton city limits, with a significant additional number being in unincorporated Kitsap County. How will you ensure those voters and taxpayers in unincorporated Kitsap County are being represented fairly and equally?
Okay. Well, I guess I kind of agree with Gary on this. Our district doesn't preclude just people in the city limits. Port Orchard extends past the city limits into the county as well as into Olalla. The Bremerton isn't just in the city limits. It goes out to part of East Bremerton, West Bremerton, and the Seabank area. My pledge is to work for the entire Port District, not just, I want to represent my district in Port Orchard, but we make decisions at the port that affect everybody and every taxpayer. I'd like to get out and reach more to those residents on the outlying areas and really find out though what their issues are and like to hear their voices heard. One thing we do hear from people all the time is sometimes, what does the port do for me? And I don't have a boat, I don't have an airplane. And I explain to them, hey, we create jobs for your sons and daughters, and we create jobs for your future generations so your families can stay here. Thank you.
Jack, this one starts for you. In 2019, how many Port of Bremerton meetings have you attended?
In 2019, I've attended every Port Commissioner meeting since May, since the date I filed.
Thank you, Jim. Gary?
I have not attended any.
Gary, what has been your experience working with government?
As a land use proponent, I've frequented many meetings at the county commissioners' chambers to either advocate for land use propositions or possibly even against those, depending on the circumstances. So I have worked with county commissioners. I've worked with local city government, helping them with their code revisions that have to do with how the city's going to grow or what decisions they're going to make about city code requirements and things like that. As a president of the Kitsap County Association of Realtors, I traveled to Washington, D.C. to advocate for realtors and talk with legislators, and that was pretty close to my involvement with state and federal governments.
Thank you. Jack?
As an economic development manager for the city of Bremerton, I have government experience. That position allowed me to work with many government agencies, including the Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council. I attended their meetings, the Puget Sound Regional Council meetings, and I attended just about any meeting on behalf of the Office of the Mayor that the mayor could not attend, so I could come back and inform the mayor of what was spoken to at such meetings. I work with the city lobbyists. I work with our legislators in Olympia, and work with all the local economic development organizations as well, the Kitsap Economic Development Alliance. Attended the CADA meetings, the Kitsap Aerospace and Defense, as well as working with all the local chambers of commerce, and visit Kitsap as well. I had the ability to see things from a different perspective and how things worked, and how, from a government standpoint, how we had the ability to go out and talk to new businesses, current businesses, and how to attract jobs to our area. So, thank you.
Jack, we'll start with this one. What is your plan to fill the Olympic View Industrial Park?
Well, the PSIC comprised of 400 acres. 200 acres is ready for development on a commercial level. My plan there is to get the infrastructure needed in place and get the property ready for either to build spec buildings and shells for companies that are looking to start up or relocate, and or give them the land plots that they like so they can create their own buildings. The second phase of that is to help bring in the racetrack for the other 200 acres that is undevelopable. It's rolling hills and gradient land that has a perfect use for a racetrack. And once we get that in there, that's going to create many job opportunities as well as the educational component of bringing in some trade schools that will help with our youth, and some STEM school programs as well.
Thank you, Gary.
Yeah, there's never been a better time right now in Kitsap County to encourage and try to attract industrial users to our county. In my business, I get pretty close to leasing and selling industrial lands and industrial buildings, and there's virtually nothing available, but there is a demand for them. And my focus would be to encourage not only running utilities out to create more building pads for industrial users that want to put their own buildings up, but also to put up a building. We don't need to put up a lot of buildings, we just need to have some lease space readily available, or available within a very short period of time, so that when those users come to town, they can have something fairly quickly. And I also think there's other opportunities in collaborating with Mason County on their future development for their area also.
Thank you, Gary. Jack?
Did I answer?
Oh, that's right. You already started it now. Right, next one, my question. Gary, we start this one with you.
Okay.
It pertains to the restaurant out on the airport property. Does the closing of the restaurant show that the Port Commission has not been successful in building economic activity and visitors to the area?
Well, it's a restaurant that had a good following, and it's unfortunate that it has to be closed down. But I think the port recognizes that they need to upgrade the restaurant so that it can be a facility that will attract more users to it, not just pilots. And I think there's other economic opportunities that could be available out there. When you have an industrial park area where you're trying to attract businesses and employees, having other types of restaurants and other services, making the workplace environment a more attractive place for businesses to want to locate, is going to help the port become more successful and provide other income opportunities for the port. So I think the port recognizes the importance of the restaurant. We just need to do more in that vein.
Can you read the question again?
Exactly. The question was, does the closing of the restaurant show that the Port Commission has not been successful in building economic activity and visitors to the area?
Well, that's a tough one, because the restaurant is an icon. They had a great following. They even had pilots and planes that would fly in just to visit the restaurant and fly out. And it was really good for the community. And upon hearing the closing, it's a shame that it had to go that far. I don't know the specifics of why the building couldn't have been refurbished in phases, and why it had to be, I think it had come to a point where it had to be done in one lump sum, which forced the business to close for 6 months. And upon hearing that, the business said, well, we can't sustain ourselves and we're going to close down. So I felt it was, and I hate to hear any time where a business has to close and we lose jobs. Was there something better the port could have done? I'm not 100% sure, but I do hope someone will come in and take over where that business left off and see the opportunity, because as that business park grows, there'll be more people and customers to come into the future restaurant. So let's hope, hopefully a negative will turn into a positive.
Thank you, Janet. We'll start this question with you. Should the Port of Bremerton get more involved in the business of fiber optic technology and high-speed internet in Kitsap County? Explain your response.
Should they get involved? I'm not sure it's the port's mission to do the job of a fiber company, but that being said, the port does need to work with the Kitsap, the PUD, and to get the properties needed, to get that infrastructure and that high fiber network needed. The port property does need the network to be able to attract those companies and those jobs needed. Those companies want the high-speed fiber. They want the 1 gigabit speed. Can't speak about it. And they want all the newest technology that requires for a tech type of company to operate. So I do feel the port needs to work together with the Public Utilities District, get that fiber in there, and do what it can to attract those businesses.
Gary?
I think the port should try to collaborate as much as they can to bring the necessary fiber optic capacity to the port district. As our technologies and businesses technology continues to expand and their data capacity needs continue to grow, that's the kind of thing that the port can do to encourage economic development and make it possible for companies to come to Kitsap County rather than choose some other place to go. And there's other things that the port can do also. Sewer capacity is something else, but just in terms of fiber optics, it's the data stream is a primary need of most companies today, and I think we need to try to cater to that as much as possible.
Thank you. Gary, we'll start this one with you. Name one major improvement or investment each for the airport, business park, and marinas you'd like to see. Why are they necessary or needed?
Okay. Well, for the airport, I think we need to be mindful of an opportunity that may come our way, and we need to have our airport sort of teed up, ready to react to something if an opportunity should come our way. And what I'm talking about is have the plans and the specs and the engineering ready to go to expand the length of the runway should the opportunity for cargo ships or other types of airplanes could come our way. That would be a fairly low investment that could produce big dividends if an opportunity does come our way, rather than just building the runway at a great deal of expense. As far as the marinas go, the Port Orchard Marina does need to have some repairs done to the breakwater, and it's going to be extremely expensive, but we need to protect that asset very much. And then as far as investment into the industrial area, that's just extending utilities to those areas and making pad-ready sites for development.
Jack, same question.
Well, as far as the airport goes, expanding the road out from out around the back east side of the airport to Lake Flora is pretty important. They finished phase 1 and phase 2 is in its engineering stage. And this will allow for the development of more property out there, which can be used to build hangars and also develop the property for business attraction. The number 2 is definitely the breakwater in the Port Orchard Marina. It's almost in disrepair. It's in its final stages where it needs to be reconstructed, and the funds are coming from the state and from the port to do that, and I believe it's in the master plan for 2020. And the third part about the industrial park is, once again, bringing in infrastructure and utilities to create pad-ready sites and build spec buildings to attract those businesses.
Thank you. Jack, we'll start this one with you. How will a clean fuel standard, either statewide or limited to the Puget Sound Clean Air Energy 4 counties, affect the operations and budget of the Port of Bremerton?
Well, the port does a really good job as it stands following all EPA mandates and anything brought down to them. There are vehicles they use that use diesel power, gas emissions over at the airport and at the marina as well. So the staff is well versed in what that takes. I think the port should be a leader. I think they should take a look at new, cleaner, greener energy sources and how they can implement that into their work vehicles and the port operations in general. So I'd like to see the port be environmental friendly and encourage the staff to learn more and develop those opportunities.
Gary?
I agree. I think the port should be mindful of anything that affects our environment, as long as it makes also economic sense. If the ability to retrofit or change the type of fuel that the vehicles use to make them cleaner burning and more efficient, then they should certainly consider doing that, as long as it is cost effective when the opportunity does avail itself. And just in general, the port should be mindful of everything they do that has to do with our environment. And you know, it's easy to be reminded of the beautiful place we live in when you're driving around the bay this morning, coming over to here around Sinclair Inlet, and the water's flat, calm, and the sun's rising in the horizon, and it's just a beautiful place we live in, and we need to protect that asset.
Thank you. Gary, this question starts with you. What do you see as the major revenue source for the Port of Bremerton that is not from the taxpayers over the next 10 years? Explain your response.
The major, most immediate revenue source I see is expanding the industrial lands around the Bremerton Airport and potentially to a racetrack. I think for the amount of investment necessary to get a return on the investment, that's the best place to put our money and encourage development that's going to give us a return that makes economic sense. The other assets the port has, the Bremerton Marina and the Port Orchard Marina, currently don't carry their own weight, but as the area continues to improve and the cities alongside those marinas continue to improve and become more attractive to boaters, those assets are going to start to pay for themselves in the future, and I see that coming along just very nicely.
Jeff?
Well, the marinas are full, the airport hangars are full, so they do generate revenues. The two marinas together combined are a great source of revenue, but they are not profit making, and they basically sustain themselves. So definitely the future is out at the Puget Sound Industrial Center. It is in the area of developing properties to attract businesses, to get those leases in place. And I think the more leases and the better we build out the business park, and the more revenues generated from that to the port, that really helps offset some of the taxpayers, what they pay into it. And we can alleviate that at some point. But we really need to be smart and balanced in the development of the Puget Sound Industrial Center. We can't just go in all cards at once. We need to do one building, one development at a time, and keep a fair and balanced development. And hopefully then we can eventually reach the point where those revenues actually are creating something for the port.
Thank you. Stay on taxes here for a moment. Jack, this question starts with you. The Port of Bremerton has about a 7% increase in property tax increases banked Under what circumstances would you initiate an increase in Port of Bremerton property taxes by the maximum amount? Be specific as to what you would justify to trigger the increase.
Well, I have pledged on my campaign platform that I would not induce that 1% tax increase. I would pledge not to raise any of the property tax levels levied by levied by the port as it stands. I think the port, what it gets in from the property tax levels each year is more than sufficient to run the operations.
I too would not raise the taxes or take the 1% increase. I'd look for other ways to fund operations or expansions that might be available, but not a tax increase.
Well, I think you guys kind of answered this, but I'll throw this one out here for you, Gary. As a potential Port of Bremerton commissioner, would you consider yourself more fiscally conservative and answerable to the taxpayers, or more driven by economic development trends and more liberal in fiscal matters?
I'm more conservative in my approach to most everything. And when it comes to economic development opportunities, I'll weigh those very carefully to make sure that there is a strong upside to those kind of decisions, not a marginal upside, so that we have some assurance that it's going to benefit the port, the community, and the taxpayers.
I am too fiscally conservative. Consider that the return on investment for taxpayers is very important. At the same time, as an economic development professional, creating those jobs and attracting those businesses is important. But like I mentioned before, doing that on a balanced level that makes sense is the way to do that. And that way you can keep the taxpayers' dollars intact, not without overly spending, and get to the goals we'd like to get to.
Jack, this question starts with you. Do you think the Kitsap Economic Development Alliance, KEDA, is bringing in the desired results of the funding they receive from the Port of Bremerton taxpayers? Explain your response.
Well, that's definitely a challenging question. KEDA gets a lot of their leads from the Washington State Department of Commerce, and in turn who gets leads from companies nationwide, and they're looking for sometimes, or a lot of times, certain criteria, certain water levels, certain electricity levels, certain sizes of buildings. And they funnel that down then from KEDA, who then searches for those requirements, and then they give that to the cities as well, and sometimes the county to look at. The economic development, the cycle is very long. It doesn't happen overnight. KEDA is the only state organization that is authorized in our region to do that type of business, which is important. We haven't seen anything large or big companies come around in quite some time, but I think KEDA does play an important level.
Gary?
I think KEDA can show some measurable results for their efforts and for the resources they are given for those efforts. I think John Powers is a good ambassador for our county and our community, and works very hard. I think that KEDA probably could do a little better job of seeking out the users that are looking in our community to try to find out if we can understand their needs sooner than later. Sometimes in the real estate business, when we find out what they're looking for, we don't always have a lot of time to react. And to be honest with you, in our area, we are not necessarily prepared for some of those larger users at the moment anyway. And that's something, if we start to track what the larger users are looking for in terms of power, capacity, and things like that, we might be able to better serve them, knowing that what they are looking for.
Gary, this question starts with you. Do you support taxpayer-funded trips to overseas air shows in the search for economic development at the port? Explain your response.
Well, I think it was a noble cause, and it was something that that the port and KETA needed to investigate, but they have done so, and we haven't seen any measurable results from that as yet. I still think that it is important for us to have a presence at those events to strike an opportunity if one befalls us, but maybe try to lower the cost and be a little bit more mindful of the cost of attending those events. Frequently you go year after year to those types of things looking for opportunities, and you talk to people, and it might not be quite that year that they're going to jump on it, but the next year you go, that's the year they're ready to do something, and so we don't want to ignore it. We just want to be careful about how we spend our money.
Jack?
Well, I attended the last KETA meeting, Kitsap Aerospace and Defense Alliance, and I learned quite a few things, which maybe differ my opinion from the past when I thought we weren't getting any results and we really need to look at it. But after going and attending the meeting, and learning that all the other major counties were players there, and the big players, the Washington State Department of Commerce, and with King County, Thurston County, Whatcom County, and Pierce County there, I do think we need to have a seat at the table. Now, as far as the taxpayer funding part, I think we could definitely diminish the amount of people going. I think a 4-person consortium can be cut down to 2, but we do need a seat at the table. And I do believe at this point, originally when KETA was formed, it was formed by Kerry Bozeman to really help the port. And that's now growing to include the county as well. And if that's the case, then maybe KETA should be enveloped into the Kitsap Economic Development Alliance instead of being having the port take the lead.
This one, I guess, starts with Jack again. Given 7 years of trips to air shows in London and Paris, what do you think the Port of Bremerton learned from their interactions with the aerospace companies? And what is needed for the Port of Bremerton to succeed in bringing aerospace jobs to the port?
Well, I think they've learned that when you're traveling overseas and you're going to the largest air show, and when we're talking air show, we're not talking planes flying and doing acrobatics. We're talking an air show where every international aerospace company is in attendance. They're learning that the cycle is slow. Those kind of companies, especially overseas, really want you to nurture those relationships. It takes years to build. You can't come in overnight and they're going to magically wave their hands and want to set up shop in our region. So, and I think they're also learning over 7 years how those kind of companies operate and what it takes to get their attention. I do feel they're getting some leads, they're getting some areas and some companies that are showing some interest. And keep in mind, the port does run an airport. An airport is air, space, and aerospace. And I think it is important for us to try and attract those type of companies to our region.
Gary?
Yeah, I agree that it's invaluable experience that needs to be, that we do need to have a seat at the table and need to interact with those folks at those air shows. You just never know what opportunity is going to befall you, or who's going to have an interest, or what's, just striking up conversations with people. You may have an idea that they haven't thought of. And one comes to mind. There was a company that located here a few years ago in the Port Orchard Industrial Park, and they build propellers for helicopters, carbon fiber. The name of the company is Omohundro. And they found that they needed to be somewhat near Boeing and the airfields over there in the Renton area, but they didn't need to be right next to them. And those are the type of things that can come up just by attending these kind of air shows. And I think that's what they're probably learning is more than anything else, is they're developing relationships that could bear fruit.
Thank you. Let's wrap up the aerospace here with the final question. Do you think Kitsap Aerospace and Defense Alliance is bringing solid and substantial results for the funding they receive from the Port of Bremerton taxpayers for economic development?
Seems like we already answered that one.
I think we did, but I just wanted to make sure that we both got it all out.
I think I did.
Okay, Jack?
Repeat the question again, because it
Do you
is
think
redundant.
Kitsap Aerospace and Defense Alliance is bringing solid and substantial results for the funding they receive from the Board of Bremerton taxpayers?
You
Do you want to start again?
Go ahead.
I thought you said KEDA, not KEDA.
KEDA,
Oh,
yeah.
No, I would question that they are providing results that support what they're being paid.
Well, the port has put into CADA $10,000. So it's not a significant amount, whereas the county now has increased theirs. This year, the port has agreed to give CADA $15,000, which is only a very small percent of their budget. But that being said, there hasn't been any tangible results seen yet. So I think the continued investment is something that the commissioners have pondered, and I think they're really waiting to see results before the next funding cycle happens.
Jack, this question starts with you. Should the Port of Bremerton receive signed assurances from the Mason County sewer system to not treat the port any differently than its own in-county customers? Basically, no service charges for out-of-Mason County customers.
To my recollection, I believe that the port commissioners have approved this deal, but I definitely think in the stipulations it must be included that out-of-county residents do not get any type of surcharge that would differ from any other resident in Mason County. And so it should maintain the same level, and I don't think Kitsap County should have any surcharge added to them.
I would agree with that. I believe they just signed the agreement also. It was under negotiation a couple of weeks ago, so I think they finished that. There is good reason for the port to work something out with Mason County. Currently, the port does effluent leaving that comes out of port operations or any tenants that are there. Industrial waste cannot go into the sewer system, so they have to trap it in membranes and haul it away. If we could, but the Mason County system would allow that. So if we can streamline the system and make it more attractive for businesses to locate there, I'd like to see if there's a way that can happen without any additional cost to our residents or the Port District.
Last question. Gary, we'll start with you. Why should people care about the Port of Bremerton race?
Well, it's interesting when I talk to people in groups or friends or family, and that come up and ask me, what I'm running for. What is the Port District? They are always interested in the answer because they don't realize what the port is here to serve. And I always start out by telling them that I think the Port of Bremerton is in a very strong position to influence how not only the future of Kitsap County is going to progress, but also how the quality of life for the people that live here can be improved. And they don't really understand that very well, but the port is in a unique position to encourage jobs, and particularly good paying jobs that could stay here and families could stay here, and that's why they need to care.
Jack?
Yeah, well, when going and do talking to people and trying to educate them about the port race, the first question is, what is a port commissioner? What does the port do? And I'm sure Gary and I do our best to educate people and let them know why the race is important and what the port does do for them. It creates economic development opportunities. It does create a good quality of life. It creates recreation opportunities. And hopefully it can create something for future generations. I tell people they should follow the race. They should pay attention. And that in any type of race, their vote counts and their vote means something. The port can do things in the future by getting more cruise ships in, working in the tourism industry, working with the Navy. And I think people just don't see the power the port has. The port has the power to get other government organizations together, create meetings, and create solutions.
Thank you both. That wraps up the question and answer session. We now get final comments, and we'll start with Jack. 2 minutes.
All right. Well, now is the time. Now is the time. Now is, the port hasn't seen a changing in the guard in a number of years. And there's going to be, obviously, 2 candidates vying for this position, and it's going to be a new person in place. I've had the ability in the past to work with the port. I worked with the port CEO and the port development of director, so I know how the port operates. And as I just mentioned before, the port has the power. The port has the power to bring together other government agencies, municipalities, mayors, councilmen, and county commissioners. And I think a good thing they should do is get together and really figure out this Highway 3 issue and really put some pressure with our lobbyists on Olympia, the lawmakers there, and the Washington State Department of Commerce to try and fix that, because that's a bottleneck for commerce. And I believe that's a starting point. I think my background as an economic development professional will also help to attract the businesses and better use what the port has to offer. My mantra has been, I want to create jobs. I want to create good family wage jobs for our future, for our sons and daughters, so when they go away to college or to a trade school, they don't have to move far away from their families to get good paying jobs. They can stay here and be close-knit family unions for future generations. So with that, I think the port can really develop the land and its assets to help attract the companies that we want here to create those type of jobs. And with that, I hope to earn your vote. Thank you.
Gary?
I think that the Port of Bremerton, like I said, is in a very unique position and a strong position to influence economic development in our county. And economic development is something that I have done for most of my career, whether it's annexing specific areas into the cities that have more control to encourage development in those areas, or sitting on a stakeholders committee to pass a fast ferry proposal that is going to be a game changer for our county in terms of improving residents' way of life and desirability to live here. And in addition, creating an opportunity zone in Port Orchard so that Port Orchard can be a better place to invest money, and it reduces the risk in Port Orchard for investment to occur there and make it a better way of life for the residents of Port Orchard. Those are the kind of things that I've done, and I would take those tools with me as a port commissioner to look for opportunities and ways that the port can encourage economic development and create jobs here. And a few ideas I have is Derek Kilmer brought up about 6 months ago that the Navy wants to cease cutting up ships. They want to build ships, and that is something that the port should get involved in and align itself with the Navy, figure out how they can keep those jobs here, cutting up ships here. And so the port has the ability and the influence and the position in our community to do a lot of wonderful things, and I hope to be involved in that process so that I can give back in a relevant way to my community. And that's why I'm running for port, and I hope for your vote. Thank you.
Well, thank you to both candidates. Thank you for everybody for coming out today. Just a reminder, your voter's guide should be in your mailbox, so if you haven't looked at it already, please get ready. Ballots will be in your box on October 18th for a November 5th election. So let's give a big round of applause to both our candidates. Thank you.